Catherine Beard, a Liberal Democrat MEP for the South East. Millions of pounds coming from the European Union to your constituency and to Oxfordshire. What's the funding for?
Well, the funding is it comes from the structural funds, and it is for supporting communities that need extra help. So where there's areas of long-term unemployment or environmental problems and those sorts of community issues. So rural Oxfordshire certainly has pockets of need, and that's why we must make sure that they bid for this money.
And how much flexibility is there in the rules that Europe sets in how this money can be used?
Well, they are reasonably tight. I mean, there are lots and lots of funding streams that come out of the European Union. And so the structural funds are specifically for helping communities, employment, young people, those sorts of things to help the economic problems that they face. There are other funding streams, such as the science funding that goes into research and technology. There are lots of other ones that go into cultural funds, to transport, to the environment, and those different sorts of funds. So when anybody applies to funding, it has to match what the criteria are for those funding streams.
And why do you feel that rural Oxfordshire needs to get a slice of this money?
It's very difficult for rural communities to make their voice heard. Anybody driving through Oxfordshire would say, oh, it's a very wealthy area. Some patches of it are. But if you are isolated in Oxfordshire, then it is harder. The buses don't come to you, the medical services don't get to you. And to get to employment, you have to have a car and be able to drive there. We've seen some wonderful examples of small businesses starting up in villages that employ local people, and that gives a whole new breath of fresh air to the local communities and those villages, and that's what I'm very keen to do. I used to be a trustee before I was elected of the Oxfordshire Rural Community Council. I'm now a patron of theirs, and so I understand rural communities. I've lived in a village in North Oxfordshire, and I'm very, very keen that every penny that comes out of the European Union is well spent and directed exactly to the communities that we want them to benefit from.
And that really fits into the next question, which is why is it important that Oxfordshire explains to the government, states to the government how it wants to see this allocation of money spent?
Well, the local communities must get together, and that's what today's conference is all about, and actually identify what are our needs, make a cogent case to the local enterprise partnership, who are the local government agents for this, put a good case to them, and then they can go to the government and say, look, we have areas of need here, we want this money spent here. It's no good keep pouring more money into those companies that are already doing well, because that's not what the funding is there for. We want small communities to be given that leg up, just to help them, to help their environment, help their communities, and help the unemployed and people who need extra training.
You mentioned the local enterprise partnership. They're a relatively new phenomenon. They've replaced the kind of regional basis that went before. Do you think this is a better way of doling out European money down to a local level?
Well, it is different. It involves many more local partners. So in that way, they should actually have their fingers on the pulse of what's going on in their own local community. So that's good. I mean, it used to be in Guildford, and they had to deal with the whole of the South East region, which wasn't always as effective as it might have been. Now we have quite a few local enterprise partnerships across the South East region, and the idea is that they are much more rooted in their local community. So hopefully it is, as you say, very new, and hopefully that will come up now, and as they find their feet, that will be better.
You mentioned that you'd like to see money going to rural projects, to rural Oxfordshire. Lots of this European money will need match funding. It will need to find equivalent funds within the UK. Do you think they'd be able to do that when it comes from rural areas? It's perhaps easier for cities and urban projects to find match funding.
Well, certainly local councils are really challenged at the moment, but the government also has money too that goes with this European funding, and yes, it all has to be match funded. Different funding streams have different requirements for funding. I have a funding pack on my website, bearder.eu, that you just click on that and it shows you all the different sorts of funding streams, and then it takes you straight through to see the criteria that you need whether you need government funding or it could be commercial funding, so you can have a partnership agreement with a commercial business. So those sorts of things you need to know about before you put your funding application in. But the local enterprise partnership should be there to help local small communities to apply for this funding.